Habari Ghani and Hotep family, this is your brother, Assad Malik, United Black America and the Pan-African Alliance, and one of the questions that I get the most often is what books should I read to expand my consciousness? What is on your reading list? What books should I read to develop my understanding of what Pan-Africanism is? And so that's why we put together these 12 books. So these are the 12 Black consciousness books that every Pan-African must read. If you call yourself Pan-African, you call yourself a member of the Black and conscious community, these books need to be on your bookshelf. The reason why I chose these 12 was, number one, 12 is a great number. That gives you time to read about a book a month and get through this entire list in a year. And by the end of the year, you will be more well-read than about 80% of the conscious community. In fact, go down the list and ask brothers and sisters if they've read these scrolls, and chances are they have not. Now, if you're looking for where to find our full list and all of our other blog posts, our videos, our podcasts, and how you can join the movement, go to Pan-Africanalliance.com. Otherwise, you can just click all the links in the bottom of this video in the description section. We didn't just pick 12 random books. We picked books that were relatively easy to read and understand if you're coming into consciousness. Look, brothers and sisters in the community have varying levels of reading ability, and we respected that. So that's why we chose the 12 books that we have on our list. These are the ABCs. This is the beginning list. This is what you pick up when you first come into this community. And if there are books on this list that you haven't read, go to PanAfricanAlliance.com, click books in the menu, and grab a copy or two. Okay, let's get into it. The very first book is obviously The Destruction of Black Civilization by Dr. Chancellor Williams. You're talking about a master teacher here. Peace be upon him. And The Destruction of Black Civilization, you ask anybody in our community, the number one book that you should read if you are new or have been in this community for a while, this is it. One of the things that stuck out to me when I read this book was the great prophecy of a group called the Mossi. And of course, you'll have to read the book to learn more about the Mossi Empire and their contributions to humanity. But one of the great prophecies read as such: for unlike so many other African societies, the migrating Mossi had learned something from the history of the blacks and their relation with Arabs. No foreigners could settle in Mossi territory, but since the Mossi themselves were great traders, they needed far-flung outlets, which the Muslims everywhere controlled. Muslim traders were therefore admitted into the country under the strict supervision of the Ministry of Muslims. All Muslim activity was restricted to trade. The religion of Islam was rejected, and it was forbidden to convert or even teach the religion in Mossi territory. In short, the Mossi saw Islam and Christianity as the white man's vehicle of conquest. It was the only black nation in time to see this. Indeed, the great Mossi prophecy held that when the first white man appeared in the land, the nation would die. And that did come to pass. In The Destruction of Black Civilization, Baba Chancellor Williams tells the story of the rise and the fall of the Mossi Empire. Of course, if we put that passage in today's context, Africa is being overran by the Chinese, the Lebanese, the Europeans, and everyone else who wants to rape and rob Africa of her wealth and human capital. Unfortunately, the lessons that the Mossi knew all those centuries ago have not been adhered to. And if that wasn't clear enough, Baba Chancellor Williams also wrote, and I quote, "The record of the 5,000 years that ended with the European conquest of the whole continent in the 19th century shows that every African state remained relatively secure and independent, as long as it maintained a strict policy of excluding foreigners from settlement within its borders. That same record makes it clear that whenever and wherever this policy was abandoned and foreigners were admitted under any pretext whatsoever, the eventual doom of that state was certain. The coming of the Caucasian, whether from Asia or Europe, or whether in the name of peace, trade, or an integrated society, or in the name of Allah of the Arabs, or God and Jesus Christ of the Jews and Christians, no matter under what pretext they came, it meant the destruction of the highly advanced civilizations of the blacks and their total degradation as a people." And just to wrap it up, in the very back of The Destruction of Black Civilization, Baba Chancellor Williams actually gives us a blueprint for building the kind of organization and the kind of nation that we would need to see the resurrection of black civilization. That is the blueprint that we use to build United Black America and the Pan-African Alliance. And if you want to check it out yourself, you need to pick that book up, PanAfricanAlliance.com. Go to books in our menu, grab a copy of that. Number 2, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. Have you ever wondered why Africa is in the position that it's in? We know that, of course, the continent is the wealthiest in mineral wealth and probably in human capital on the planet. However, the people are suffering as some of the poorest on the planet. Well, that was engineered. When members of this organization and I read this book, we were able to identify 15 ways Europe underdeveloped Africa during the colonial era, and this became the playbook or the blueprint for neocolonialism that we see the Chinese and the Lebanese and other groups using. And by the way, the exploitation of Africa never ended. But those 15 ways are population decline, technological arrest, trade imbalance, market disruption, the expansion of capitalism, expatriation of surplus, wage depression, price control and monopolization, colonial government policy and taxation, division of labor, growth without development, monoculture, undernourishment, miseducation, and white values. This was written by Walter Rodney, a Guyanese who literally gave his life. He was assassinated by his own government. So that really lets you know the power that this book contains. It's about so much more than how Europe underdeveloped Africa, but how neocolonialism, colonialism, capitalism, and what we call the weapons of white supremacy. So you should definitely add this book to your collection. Number 3, Black Africa, the economic and cultural basis for a federated state. And this is by Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop. This is a Senegalese warrior, scholar, peace be upon him. And it is from this book that we get our definition of Pan-Africanism. So Pan-Africanism is a political concept. It's a belief in the laws and representation that benefit Africans in the diaspora. And in this book, Dr. Diop makes the case for a United States of Africa, because if we are to exercise our political authority, we can only do that within the boundaries of a sovereign state. Black Africa, the economic and cultural basis for a federated state, by Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop. Number 4, Introduction to Mayat Philosophy by Muata Ashby. So in this book, Dr. Ashby reclaims our stolen legacy from the yogic traditions. Right now, everyone's big on Ayurvedic traditions, practicing yoga, and really getting deep into the Indian spiritual systems. Well, he brings it back to its Kemetic source, and he gives students an overstanding of the practical applications of Kemetic science. It ain't all just mental masturbation. There are practical applications to Mayat philosophy. As one of the most important spiritual leaders in the study of Kemetic philosophy and practice, Dr. Ashby's work is critical for anyone on their path to developing their knowledge of self. The Introduction to Mayat Philosophy, Spiritual Enlightenment Through the Path of Virtue. Number 5, Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery by Dr. Naim Akbar. Look, I don't care who you are. Akbar deserves some real estate on your bookshelf. This book in particular is a life-changing book. I'm going to play you a clip that should serve as a testimony from a brother who recently read Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery by Dr. Naim Akbar.
This book really blew my mind when I was in high school, because it basically, and look how small it is. It's less than 100 pages, or is it 100 pages? It's less than 100 pages. This is like a pamphlet. It's only like 70 pages, but it was very weighty. Naim Akbar is a psychologist, psychiatrist. He's a genius. He's a mastermind. Naim Akbar. This is actually him on the back. We were talking about how the imagery of a white Jesus affects the psychology of the black child or the black teenager. And I remember when I was 16 that I realized there was something wrong with it, because Jesus was born in the Afro-Asiatic region to an Afro-Asiatic line, and spoke Afro-Asiatic languages, but he came out with blonde hair and blue eyes. It didn't make any sense. When I was around 16, 17, the time I was reading this book, I started thinking, wait a minute, what the hell is going on here? You have this imagery of God, of divinity, of the child of the Most High, and he looks nothing like me. Not only does he look nothing like me, he actually is a false image, because Jesus himself, being from the Afro-Asiatic line, from Afro-Asiatic flock, and they painting him as European, it causes confusion. It limits the mind of the African or African American or the Moor, black, whatever you want to say, because it doesn't connect you with the divine. In your head, the image of the divine is European, as opposed to the image of the divine being with you. So these are all psychological chains that were placed and implemented during the time of slavery. But this book shows how to crack the chain. So it talks about color discrimination, how there's certain people who think that they're better because they're a certain color, because they're darker, or because they're lighter. Or they think they're inferior because they're darker, or they're lighter. And he breaks those concepts and those belief systems down and say, all that is BS.
So again, the fifth book on our list is Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery by Dr. Naeem Akbar. Book number 6, Conscientism by Kwame Nkrumah. Now, you all probably know that Kwame Nkrumah was the very first democratically elected president of Ghana, but his contributions to Pan-Africanism in putting it into action on the ground in very real ways is immeasurable. It's thanks to Kwame Nkrumah that we have today's African Union, which of course we all know started out as the Organization for African Unity. It was the closest step thus far that we've come to Pan-Africanism. Kwame Nkrumah was also responsible for the creation of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. It was the armed wing of his political ideology, and conscientism really sums up how Kwame Nkrumah intended on this system working, particularly in the midst of capitalism, because then there was a big battle going on between capitalism, communism, and socialism, and Africa found itself caught in the middle of that. And of course, Kwame Nkrumah emphasized the application of African values with a new political and economic philosophy that wasn't a copycat of what was going on in the West, but was something unique and original to us. So if you really want to understand what Pan-Africanism looks like in practical application, Kwame Nkrumah is the best ancestor to learn from. And his book, Conscientism, sums up that political philosophy. Next book on our list, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness. This scroll was written by Michelle Alexander, and she is truly a warrior scholar. She wrote it under the Obama administration here in the United States. Obama, of course, you all know, first so-called black elected president in the United States. And her emphasis was that not too much had changed. And in fact, things had gotten worse under Obama's age of colorblindness. And the reason for that was mass incarceration had replaced the old system of segregation and disenfranchisement and specifically targeted people of color. Now, we know that's true. There are innumerable statistics and news headlines that demonstrate this.
A new analysis of the U.S. prison population finds more black men are incarcerated now than were enslaved in 1850. The figures are stunning. They are sobering, eye-opening numbers. The latest estimates by the Bureau of Justice putting the number of imprisoned African-American men at more than 846,000.
Family, this book was so revolutionary that it was banned in prisons because the administrations across the country and around the world feared that if inmates got hip to what was going on with this system of mass incarceration, there would be a mass uprising, and they were right to fear that. It is a wicked system. And this book, unlike any other, except for maybe Angela Davis's old book, Are Prisons Obsolete? This will help you understand the weapon of white supremacy known as prosecution better than any other book that I think I have read. So The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander needs to be on your bookshelf. Number 8 is Powernomics by Dr. Claude Anderson. So in this book, we come to understand that from the days following the end of the Civil War all the way up into the Civil Rights Movement, we as a community, black men and women as a community, were forced to rely on our communities to meet our needs. All we had was us back then. Obviously, we couldn't go into white communities, and other ethnic groups were taking care of themselves and facing their own tribulations. And so we built everything that we needed in our own self-sufficient, self-sustaining black communities. And that led to a period of prosperity. You had the rise of communities like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Rosewood, Florida. It wasn't until we attempted to integrate with groups that did not have our best interest at heart that we began experiencing a decline in black wealth, a decline that continues to this day. In fact, this decline appears to be accelerating. And so establishing our economic sovereignty is the only way to protect ourselves from manipulation by alien economies. Economic sovereignty is our ability to control our economy and our community in response to our own need. But there hasn't really been a clear action plan until Dr. Claude Anderson's book was published. And I say that because in this book, he lists out 12 economic action steps that change the way that we behave. It's changed the way that our organization, the Pan-African Alliance, has coordinated our efforts. It's changed the way that I've managed my businesses and my finances. And we've seen the results, the fruits of our labor from following Dr. Claude Anderson's economic action steps. Steps like focusing on wealth building and restoring the economic intent of the original civil rights laws. This book is both economic and political. Dr. Claude Anderson has a background in politics, and he discusses that the original civil rights laws were intended to be economic and not only social or political. One of his economic action steps, number 4 specifically, talks about countering the brain drain with businesses that attract black talent from schools, the government, and corporate America. Look, the hood has failed our young students. Students who are ambitious, students who are intelligent, students who see themselves as upwardly mobile have nowhere to go in the hood. There are no businesses, there are no opportunities unless you're getting into the more illicit activities. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So, as business owners, as entrepreneurs, as upwardly mobile men and women ourselves, we owe it to our children in the hood to come back to the hood, to build our businesses there. And that goes to economic action step number 5, establishing root businesses within black communities. And that creates an opportunity for students in the hood to stay in the hood, keeping that black dollar circulating in black neighborhoods. And Powernomics is a critical book, particularly if you're interested in the area of life that we call economics, particularly in our efforts to counter the weapon of white supremacy called fraud. Number 9 is The Miseducation of the Negro. This is coming from Dr. Carter G. Woodson, one of the first, if not the first, black men to graduate from Harvard. He is also the reason why we have Black History Month here in the United States. It started off as Black History Week, and that's all thanks to Dr. Carter G. Woodson. But in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, there are 2 lessons that I really want to emphasize here. And lesson number 1, and this is a direct quote coming from the book: if you can control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his action. When you determine what a man or woman shall think, you don't have to concern yourself about what he or she will do. If you make them feel like they are inferior, you don't have to command them or compel them to accept an inferior status, for they will seek it out for themselves. If you make a man or woman think that he or she is justly an outcast, you don't have to order him or her to the back door. They'll go without being told, and if there is no back door, their very nature will demand one. When we think about the weapon of white supremacy that we call miseducation, which is defined as the cultivation of an alien identity, what happened in this system of white supremacy is that the African identity has been subordinated to that of the Europeans or the Albions or really every other group out there. And that has compelled us to accept an inferior status. And we accept that inferior status when we look at members of our own race as unacceptable romantic partners, when we look at members of other races as come-ups, and you know what I mean. Typically, whenever someone becomes successful, they look outside of their race for a romantic partner. We accept an inferior status when we beg the government or other institutions to treat us fairly rather than demanding our birthright. And the other quote that stands out to me is this one: history shows that it doesn't matter who is in power. Let me say that again. History shows that it doesn't matter who is in power. Those who have not learned to do for themselves and have to depend on others never obtain any more rights or privileges in the end than they did in the beginning. Now, Dr. Carter G. Woodson wrote this back in the 1920s or 30s. And of course, in the age of Obama, everyone thought that, well, since we got a brother in office, we'll be taken care of. Negative. Again, history shows that it doesn't matter who's in power. Those who have not learned to do for themselves and have to depend solely on others never obtain any more rights or privileges in the end than they did in the beginning. So no matter where you are in the world, understand that group solidarity, voting in political blocs, and moving as a unit is the only way to ensure that we are taking care of ourselves. It doesn't matter who's in political power. It doesn't even matter who's in economic power, because as a group, we can achieve the same as long as we are clear about the rights and privileges that we are seeking to obtain. Books number 10 and 11 are the autobiography of Malcolm X and Negro with a Hat. Look, it blows my mind how many queens and kings say that they're Garveyites. They say they're followers of El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X, peace be upon him. But you've never read their stories. You have no idea what led to the establishment of their philosophies, how they achieved the results that they achieved. And so these books deserve a place on your bookshelf, particularly if you call yourself a Garveyite or a Pan-African or a member of the Black and Conscious community. Marcus Garvey is one of the intellectual founders of United Black America and the Pan-African Alliance, and he's had such a profound influence on world history that you are probably completely unaware of thanks to the public fool system, that not reading this book will put you in the back of the class. And then the final book is The ISIS Papers, written by Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, peace be upon her. Look, this is a strategy guide for dealing with the system of white supremacy. It is from Dr. Frances Cress Welsing that we as an organization got our concept of the 9 areas of life. The 9 areas of life, which we call the 9 battlefields, are economics, entertainment, education, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and warfare. Now, why is this important? It's important for 2 reasons. Number 1, many people come into this community and they mistakenly believe that militancy is a requirement. Like, you have to be militant to be a part of this community. That's not necessarily true. There are 9 different battlefields that we've got to be able to fight on if we are to see the resurrection, the redemption, the renaissance of Black civilization. And the battlefield that you choose is based on your life purpose, your life mission, your NIA, which of course within this organization, we teach all of our members how to develop. And so the second reason why understanding the 9 areas of life are important, the 9 battlefields that we fight on, are it teaches you about the world around you. It helps you develop your knowledge of self. So those are the 12 books that belong on your bookshelf, family. I'm going to include links to all these books below. And again, just running through the list quickly, they are The Destruction of Black Civilization, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, Black Africa, Introduction to Ma'at Philosophy, Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery, Conscientism, The New Jim Crow, Powernomics, The Miseducation of the Negro, The Autobiography of Malcolm X, Negro with a Hat, and The ISIS Papers. And before I wrap up here, I'm going to invite you to go to panafricanalliance.com/VIP. If you become a Suitin level supporter, you're going to get a lot of these titles absolutely free as a benefit of supporting us. You'll also get access to our podcast. I'll send you a red, black, and green dog tag in the mail. It'll put you in direct contact with me. We offer free web hosting so that you can get that Black online business up and off the ground. So head to panafricanalliance.com/VIP and get on the team. Thanks for watching this video. Please leave a comment. And if there are any books that you suggest for our future reading lists, our future book clubs, or if you think I forgot a title in this list of 12 basic books, throw it in the comments section, family. Ninakupenda and Abibi Fahodie. Shimhotep.